What happens when the best athletes in the world lose? The Secret to Victory is a new podcast from Gatorade and Gimlet Creative about how the best athletes in the world use defeat to fuel a win. Episodes feature Serena Williams, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, Matt Ryan, J.J. Watt, Karl Anthony Towns, Kyle Schwarber, and the people who know them best. Visit Gatorade.com/podcast to listen now or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Hall of Famer Marshall Faulk, and you're listening to the Fantasy Footballers.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast, coming to you from the Playdraft Studios with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
Oh! Let's get down to business!
What a day to be alive.
Let's get down to business, fellas.
Let's get a little divisional up in here.
It's business time.
Got on my business socks.
Business, business, business. Welcome into the podcast. Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, Mike the Fantasy Hitman Wright. Back again, bringing you fantasy goodness. And it is, it's Tuesday, fellas. You excited for the week?
It's my favorite day that starts with twos.
Okay. All right. It's going to be one of those weeks. All right. July 18th, 2017. Great show today. As Jason alluded to, we are getting divisional. We're going to start breaking down divisions for the next few shows. AFC North, NFC North, get you caught up on not only our predictions for the players in fantasy for those divisions, but also we'll break down the movers. Who's jumped teams, who's changed, which quarterback that we really think can make a big difference with new receivers, new offensive weapons. Let's go ahead and jump into the quick question real quick. This one comes in from Kev White.
Is this Kevin White
of
the Chicago Bears?
Probably not doing much.
He's getting into fantasy these days, just in case.
All right, who's your favorite post-hype sleeper for this season?
Sounds like he's fishing here. hey guys, my name's Kev White. Who's your? If you had to pick a wide receiver from
who's hyped coming out of college,
the North,
is he still considered post-hype? Isn't he just like post-hype?
Yeah, post.
Sorry, Kevin, you're not.
So a post-hype sleeper, as was explained to me, was a player that last year was built up, and this year you're thinking bounces back?
Yes. They didn't perform to your expectations.
The hype was a year early.
Yes.
Okay, so who's yours, Jason?
Mine, I'm going back to one of my guys last year that I really liked his opportunity and his talent. It's Lamar Miller. Last year, everyone who drafted him was disappointed because he was a first-round draft pick. He cost you a lot, and even though when he went out and up through week 15 in the NFL, he was actually the running back 12. But people who owned him weren't happy with him. He was consistent, but he never brought you those winning weeks, where a running back just goes out, gets that 2-touchdown game, 120 yards on the ground.
I remember before the season being more and more and more jealous of you having him in your dynasty roster and thinking he could be that guy.
Well, and that's part of it. He's only 26 years old. We look at it like, oh, maybe he got over there, can't handle the workload, he's broken down. They get D'Onta Foreman, who obviously the news coming out, we'll talk about that in a minute, seemingly better for Lamar Miller. But the reason that I like Lamar Miller is right now he's almost a third-round draft pick, depending on if where you're at in the turn. He can fall to you in the third, at the top of the third. That's his floor. This is a guy who's guaranteed 250 carries and 30 receptions. If he sucks this year, he's going to pay about that value. He's going to return, basically do what he did last year, which if he's your RB2 and you've got another great wide receiver on your roster already, I think you're going to be really happy with him. His upside is tremendous because it's funny. Everyone thinks DeAndre Hopkins is going to bounce back now that Brock Osweiler's gone, that Deshaun Watson is going to come in and fix it. I don't see that. But a running quarterback like Deshaun Watson can open things up much more for the running game. I mean, we saw that with Robert Griffin III coming in, that running quarterback, and all of a sudden Alfred Morris was a beast in his rookie year. So Lamar Miller, to me, he's got a safe floor, a good price in drafts, and he still has upside.
Can I just copy-paste that argument almost in its entirety? I mean, you basically made Todd Gurley's argument for me. Todd Gurley's my post-hype sleeper. Other than your discussion about Watson and the threat of the run from the quarterback position, basically guaranteed 250-plus carries. basically guaranteed 30 receptions, being moved around the formation for Todd Gurley. You have McVay that comes in, Sean McVay, who knows what Gurley can bring. We've talked about this before. The fact that Gurley was so extremely hyped really, really hurts him in his perception this year. Number 15 in PPR leagues, number 20 in standard leagues, on probably the worst season you could have ever imagined or predicted for a player. Still played 16 games. Todd Gurley right now is a value to me. I think the upside is tremendous, much like Jason said about Lamar Miller, upside being tremendous. That's my post-type sleeper.
I will complete the trifecta of running backs, except mine is not a yawner. Talking about floors over there. I'm talking about a man who can bust through the ceiling. Amir Abdullah, as long as his foot's not still busted. Dave Burkett, the Detroit Free Press, he just came out saying he's setting his over-under on Amir's rushing yards at 850. You think, well, that's not that great, except he has added on to that his over-under for his receiving yards at 450 yards. You give me 1,200 yards from scrimmage, that's absolutely fantastic. The Lions did nothing to address the running back position except announce over the offseason that Amir Abdullah is looking at a featured role.
Does it concern you though? I mean, maybe I'm gonna hold off. We're talking AFC North today. So we'll talk about Abdullah in the running game, the changes made in Detroit, and get into all of that. A reminder, Jason, you have a horn. Do you want to?
Oh, I do.
You brought a horn in. All right. Foot Clan assemble. All right, footclanvote.com. If you haven't voted for us for the 2017 Podcast Awards, I encourage you to head over there. I have to share this story. I know we have a long show today. I don't really care. We have to share this story.
Whoa, this must be a good story if Dad doesn't care.
Midlife crisis here.
All right, we got off the show last week. I think it was the Saturday show.
Is this a back in my day
No,
story?
and Jason we had done the Foot Clan horn on the show. And I went back to the desk, and when we should have been getting some good hard work done on the UDK, Jason is lost. He is obsessed now with locating and finding the Horn of Gondor.
It should be easy.
It should be easy to find a fictional horn.
Well, no, yeah, you can find anything from Lord of the Rings. You want to replica anything, you can find it easily, unless it is the Horn of Gondor. Impossible, doesn't exist. To the point where
I'm getting
found
to that.
one.
Yeah, Jason finally found one.
And it was incredible.
Couldn't believe it. Giant Horn of Gondor, and it was made to be like put on a child's bike as a horn. And Jason's just $30. Oh my gosh, it's only $30. We have to get this for the show. It looks authentic. We're like, whatever, go get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got pranked.
Yeah.
Yeah, he ended up trying to buy something from ThinkGeek. That was an April Fool's joke, and he was distraught.
Very disappointed.
But
before we move on real quick, Jason, how does this make you feel about April Fools?
I love April Fools.
All right,
I'm
man.
happy to have been had.
You looked like an idiot.
All right, we're going to get into the news.
I usually do.
Going to get into the news. Before we do that, just a reminder, check us out on Twitter, @TheFFBallers.
Did we tell them why we're assembling?
Yeah.
I got lost in the story.
Yeah, footclanvote.com. I said we were nominated for the 2017 Podcast Awards, Mike.
Thank you.
And by we, I mean the verified ones.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Just you and I, Andy.
News and notes from around the league.
Might need to get Kleenex as a sponsor for Mike on that one.
Yeah.
Very depressing. All right, big news. And I was just – these things bother me so much, guys. You know they do. All right, Ezekiel Elliott involved in a late-night incident at a Dallas bar on Sunday. This source confirmed this to ESPN's Adam Schefter. This is a multiple report thing. Obviously something happened. And then D'Onta Foreman reports that he had been arrested for marijuana possession and unlawful carrying of a weapon. Now, his attorney released a statement regarding the arrest saying he's disputing charges. But again, for both of these, they could both be mostly innocent of whatever's gone on. I'm not saying they can't. But you put yourself in a position as a player to either be accused of marijuana possession and unlawful carrying of a weapon or being accused of punching out a guy in a Dallas nightclub bar, or you don't.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I had no idea that there was a way you could have unlawful carrying of a weapon in Texas. I was completely unaware that was. I thought you could just grab them.
That is the attorney dispute. This is a completely lawful gun. Regardless, let's focus first on Ezekiel Elliott because that's the headline news this morning. And we had a report last week. Dak Prescott had came out, and it was kind of odd. He criticized Ezekiel Elliott for being in the ESPN body issue, which tons of athletes have done. And Mike was like, Mike, you were upset with Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
Maybe you are.
I've also criticized ESPN for not having me in the body issue, though.
Right. They want to sell some copies.
No. That is a wise move.
I've sent them praise. Plus, you're not verified. All right. And Ezekiel Elliott, he shows up in that issue, and you're wondering why Dak Prescott criticizes him. And my theory then was, look, Dak has shown a propensity to, Zeke has shown this almost like Gronk without the long-term performance and proven, situation where he's distracted. It looks like Zeke has been distracted this offseason. You had the weird incident with the woman on the boat. You've had different things that come up. To me, it was kind of behind the curtains. Why would Dak criticize Zeke for that? Maybe Zeke's not around enough. Maybe Zeke's not doing enough with the team. And so it's getting under the skin. And then you have this report breaking out. We already know domestic issue potentially could cause a game or two or more suspension. How did this hit you when you saw the news?
It's really bad timing for Zeke. And the NFL, it was being reported that they're about to, rule on the domestic situation. It was also being reported that Zeke is going to release a statement, maybe trying to sway the NFL in one way or the other. But before he can do that, he's in this incident. Now, we're just reporting news here. Nothing has been filed against Ezekiel Elliott. He was not in a police report, but now there's talks of eyewitness situation. Whatever it is, it's just it's really unfortunate. This weekend was just a crapper of bad news of guys getting in trouble, and I'm with you, Andy. It sucks seeing all this stuff, but at the same time, it's like, what do these guys do as far as in you're a target? I have no idea what the life of an NFL player is like. You're a young man. You have basically unlimited assets. You can go have fun however you want, but you are a target for the public, so I'm not giving any answers here, so I apologize if I'm just asking questions, but it's just like it's everything in here is just it sucks.
It's too broad sweeping and impossible to just say, here's the answer to the problem.
Right.
Because the problem is it's far reaching. I mean, like you said, these players, they come up, they have tons of friends and influences around them, and they're very young. And we know the NFL does.
And let's be honest, like think about 22-year-old self.
Absolutely.
You now have $2 million.
Yep. What are you going to do?
You're a celebrity and you get everything you want.
No, it's more about can you get people around them early to let them know the impact. Look, Zeke might have done nothing wrong, but he still was in a position where he wasn't above reproach as an NFL celebrity role model athlete and puts himself in the spotlight for the third time for a bad reason.
Well, the craziest part is just it's while he's under investigation that he would do this. I mean, you're waiting for a possible suspension to come down.
Yeah.
While you're asking people to trust you, and then you say, well, but I'm not really trustworthy. In my opinion, I think this is something that the NFL will take into consideration when I didn't think he was going to be suspended. I said that the last show for whatever happened. Now I would say, there's a better chance that the NFL says we need to, help this 21-year-old and say, You gotta act by the rules, or you're gonna lose games.
Yeah, we need to digress, I guess, into the fantasy implications here of the Zeke and the Foreman potential legal issues. Jason, you talked about Lamar Miller. Obviously, it's not good for Foreman to be in this situation if he was ever going to take over a backup role.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of backups there. Alfred Blue and Hunt and Foreman, I think, is still probably the favorite for that backup role. The first few weeks of their schedule is a little rough anyway, so if he does miss that, I don't think this really affects anything fantasy football-wise. I wouldn't have expected Foreman to come in the first few weeks and really be any kind of startable fantasy asset at all. The only reason it would change things is if Lamar Miller got injured in the first week or something like that.
All right, Michael Floyd has been suspended 4 games for violating the league's substance abuse policy. Mike Zimmer said he'd be released if the team determines he's lying about his kombucha tea defense.
The old kombucha tea defense.
He probably is. David Gettleman,
This is big news.
General manager of the Panthers, has been fired despite 3 of 4 playoff appearances during his tenure. Reports said that he was not on board with a Greg Olsen extension.
Well,
he's also the GM that is not that chose to let Josh Norman go.
And then you
Steve
had
Smith.
Yeah, Steve Smith.
D'Angelo Williams.
D'Angelo Williams.
Loyalty is not built into his DNA, it seems.
D'Angelo Williams tweeted out essentially calling him
a snake.
A snake?
Yeah, not nice words.
Yeah, he's not a player's GM, but the reality is for fantasy football, for Carolina Panthers fans, you don't have to be a player's GM. In fact, a lot of times when you're not a player's GM, you might be a better GM.
I didn't know there were players' GMs.
Well, I mean, Steve Kine.
I thought there were owners' GMs.
I'm just saying, like a player's coach. When you're one of those guys that the players love, the GM, they know you got your back. This has never been one of those guys, but a lot of times, I mean, you look at the Patriots shipping guys out when they're in their prime or not re-signing guys to long-term deals. It's not necessarily unwise, and he came in to a situation with the Panthers with a very bad cap. A bad cap situation. He fixed it. He drafted well. So long-term, I'm not saying this is bad because we don't know who they're replacing him with yet, but they are letting go a good GM, in my opinion.
All right, the Bears plan to start Mike Glennon for the whole season. Last bit of news. That makes me, honestly, sounds strange, makes me more excited for the receiving options in Chicago. Mike Glennon can be Brian Hoyer. Mike Glennon can throw the ball around the field enough, I think, to when the wide receivers eventually get sifted out.
Yeah, check back with me in like week 6.
Yes. Okay. All right, that's it. Let's get into the divisions.
Let's get divisional.
All right, we're going to start in the AFC North. We're going to break down the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last year, 11-5. Talk about the players of note in the fantasy football sphere for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Talk about some additions and subtractions to this roster and what we expect from Mike. Mike is pointing at me.
We also forgot to throw in. We were in the news and we didn't mention it. Kirk Cousins, Le'Veon Bell not extended. They will play the year on their franchise tag, which means they can only play on that. The team cannot extend them until the end of the year.
That's right. We were waiting for that news to break right before the show started, and nobody signed. Apparently, Kirk Cousins turned down $53 million guaranteed. He's a better man than I.
It's because he cannot sign that deal yet with the San Francisco 49ers, where he will end up.
Yeah, Washington's rebuttal to Kirk Cousins was they basically came out, showed all their cards, and said this is what Kirk Cousins turned down, putting all blame, pointing all fingers at Cousins. Meanwhile, I mean, you had those years before where Kirk Cousins wanted to get something done, and the team pretty much devalued him.
He does not want to play for Washington.
Yeah.
So I'll bet he'd want to play for the Steelers next year when Big Ben leaves.
All right, let's talk about Big Ben. Let's talk about Lev Bell, Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant. In terms of additions, subtractions this offseason, you really saw the drafting of Juju Smith-Schuster and the handcuff, not the handcuff that D'Angelo Williams was, who is now gone, as well as Ladarius Green. But James Conner drafted in the 3rd round. Yeah, Jason, a big fan of James Conner.
He's a good player. So
let's talk about what we expect to see from this offense and this team this year. One of the more interesting facts that I saw about the Steelers in general, obviously a very, very good offensive line. The ball's in Lev Bell's hands frequently, but this is a team that also went for 2 points, by far more than anybody else in football. 32% of the time they were going for 2. That's
good for you.
Extra points for Big Ben, Antonio Brown, opportunities for Lev Bell. I think the next closest team was 5% less is Tampa. So interesting aspect to that offense, but what are the headlines here for you, Mike?
The headlines, it was James Conner was one because that's what reminded me, was thinking about Le'Veon Bell and a possible holdout situation. He has not signed his tender, which means he's not under obligation to report to camp. He could show up at the end of August. What that does, while he's, trying to play the leverage card, on the other side of that is now the team gets a really good look at James Conner and gets to decide well, maybe at the end of the year we're going to let you go and you can get your money somewhere else, Le'Veon Bell, because we like James Conner.
How do you feel about, you could argue that Lev Bell's making the right decision not showing up to football activities until late because you're going into a franchise year. You have no guaranteed money beyond that, and you don't want to get yourself hurt.
I'm not blaming him.
Rest
at
your body,
all.
Lev Bell.
It's the thing of running backs skipping preseason or skipping training camp, and they come back and they get hurt because their body has not been reacclimated to getting hit.
Yeah, that it's possible. I mean, obviously we've got a history of that with Le'Veon Bell already. The story to me from the Steelers is the wide receiving core. Okay, throw Antonio Brown out of the conversation. We don't need to discuss him. He's great. He's the best wide receiver in the game. But from there, Martavis Bryant wasn't there last year. So does he just come in and inherit that role the way that most everyone expects him to do, or is calling for? The battle between Sammy Coates and Marcus Wheaton was lost by both parties last year. They both knocked each other out and
they
fell
lost
down.
the job last year to Martavis, who wasn't even playing.
Right, but now Eli Rogers, who looked great for a rookie, and Juju Smith-Schuster. I'm just curious how, outside of Antonio Brown, there are plenty of targets and value to go around here. Do you guys see any value in either Eli or Juju this year?
I've said I think Juju is kind of a deep sleeper candidate to me. I think he's very, very talented. This was a guy that was projected to go at the very top of the NFL draft if he had come out a year earlier. Passing yards per game, like Jason said, 5th in the league. There's a lot of yardage to go around. It's not all going to Antonio Brown. It took me a while to get on the Martavis train because I wanted to see him come into camp or basically OTAs and show that he's ready to play football. All indications are that's the case. So I'm definitely looking at Martavis Bryant as a very high upside play for fantasy owners. And like Mike said, D'Angelo Williams the last 2 years, when he's had the opportunity to start, he's been a headline guy. So if that means that James Conner is that guy, how high do you handcuff your Lev Bell?
I don't know if I handcuff him in the draft at all. But if we are getting further and further into August, I mean, we're approaching the beginning of the season, and we still haven't even seen Le'Veon Bell. In some drafts, I may hedge that of my feeling that running backs need some form of training camp to get their body ready. And the last thing I'll say about the receiving core is there's been talk about them going 4 wide.
As they should.
And I mean, that passing attack, Brown, and then you have freak athletes in Martavis Bryant and Sammy Coates and Juju Smith, who can be the big slot guy that's been reported. How are you possibly going to stop this?
Is Jesse James underrated?
Nope.
Okay.
Not for me.
You're not a big Jesse James fan.
If you're in a PPR league, I think Jesse James could, if they go 4 wide and that becomes like their standard set, then no, because that would come at the expense of Jesse James. But I do think if they keep with the same offense they've had over the last few years, and you could argue why not, Jesse James should be there and utilized. Obviously, Ladarius Green is gone, and Heath Miller always made a good chunk of fantasy points in that role.
He made them. Just cooked
them
in a stew.
Put a little bit of butter.
I wondered where you were going to go. I just wanted to let it keep coming. All right, we're going to move on to the Ravens.
Before we get to the Ravens, I want to thank today's sponsor, Indochino, and this is a genuine thank you because I've never, ever put on a piece of clothing that fit me better than my Indochino suit, specifically because it's tailored to you. I mean, they've got a really easy process where you measure yourself according to this video. You send them your numbers. 4 weeks later, you've got a custom tailored suit that fits you like nothing else. I wear it to, if you got weddings out there, every man needs a suit, whether it's, church events, weddings, wherever.
Your draft.
Some people wear them to the office,
like
Jason.
Yeah, so this week, any Foot Clan listener can get a premium Indochino suit for just $379 with the promo code FOOTBALLERS. That's 50% off the regular price for a made-to-measure premium suit. Plus, shipping is free, so that's Indochino.com. Promo code FOOTBALLERS for any premium suit, just $379 and free shipping. You'll never have to worry about badly fitting suits or expensive trips to the tailor again. Get ready to look like $1 million, people.
Foot Clan, we want to thank Pristine Auction. Great friends of the show, the best memorabilia site of all time.
We are giving away 3 jerseys that we got off of Pristine Auction.
We are. So that you can check out that that's footclangiveaway.com, but you got to check out Pristine Auction. All the jerseys you've ever seen hanging up on the wall, all the autographed merchandise we have here at Foot Clan headquarters, we get it from Pristine Auction. The other day I saw a signed Conor McGregor glove. I mean, delightful. I wish I would have gotten in on
Surprised
that.
you didn't buy it.
I'm very surprised at myself that I did not as well, but the signatures are
Notorious.
always 100% authenticated. They only work with the best. Pristine Auction is all about bringing the best to you. Check it out, PRISTINE auction.com. You make a completely free account. When you do that, let them know that the Fantasy Footballers sent you. You will not believe some of the prices on these guaranteed authentic signatures on these jerseys. Foot Clan.
Don't embarrass yourself. Invite your friends over to your man cave and have a bunch of Pristine Auction gear on the wall.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about the Ravens. We're going to stay in the North, talking about the Ravens.
Oh, the North.
The North. All right, I'm very excited to talk about this team. I think that this is one of those, you're going to find a diamond or two in the fantasy world on this roster. They threw the ball 61% of the time last year. That is number 1 in football. Wow. Okay, so Danny Woodhead arrives. Jeremy Maclin arrives to this offense. Obviously, they lost
A lot.
Steve Smith, right, in the offseason. Dennis Pitta is gone. Kyle Juszczyk is gone. And we have some turnover on the offensive line, right tackle, offensive guard, center. So there's some shakeup there, and we know they want to be able to run the ball. But wanting to run the ball, like the Cardinals did for years without David Johnson, they wanted to run the ball.
We did.
Like Detroit last year. They want to run the ball. But what happens is push comes to shove on the field. Can they run the ball with the offense they have? Can they run the ball with Terrence West and Kenneth Dixon, who doesn't come back until a 4-game suspension? Or is this pie in the sky thinking, and we're expecting 60% of the time they're throwing the ball?
I think the throwing percentage comes down. They become more balanced. Terrence West is a great late-round flyer. We've talked about him. He's essentially free for a running back that's guaranteed to be the starter for at least 4 weeks, if not more. Danny Woodhead just showed up in the news again. Joe Flacco praising Danny Woodhead's passing game chops, saying we haven't had a back like this since Ray Rice, who had spectacular pass catching ability. He's also very cheap. I mean, that's kind of the overarching theme of the Baltimore Ravens is fantasy value, because for whatever reason, fantasy players just don't want to go in on this offense when they should.
Oh, I get it.
Late in the why? Why do you get it? Explain this to me.
Yeah, the reason why all of their values are very low is because you've got a combination of question marks with a low scoring team. I don't think anybody is expecting the Ravens to be, a high powered, a lot of touchdowns to be shared. And you go, well, who's going to be the starting running back? How will it break down? And that's why I think instead of just saying it's going to be this guy or it's going to be that guy and getting it right or getting it wrong, you have to kind of look at the range of outcomes. So like Terrence West, great value because he's super late in drafts, but he has no upside, right? I mean, he's got no chance to be an RB1.
Okay, I would say he's got RB2 upside.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, like, on a weekly basis, he's going to be a guy that you're going to get late in your draft. He will be a value for where you get him, but he's not necessarily a championship winner. So do you want to, take your capital and use it on that, or do you want to swing more for the fences? Danny Woodhead, if you're in a PPR league, could inch closer to that RB1. The guy that
I'm afraid of ending up like a Tennessee situation a couple years ago when you had Bishop Sankey and Antonio Andrews and an offense that just can't produce one guy to give you any kind of consistent performance. And West doesn't make me go, oh, wow, that's the guy. Even though he had a pretty decent year last year, they still, when Kenneth Dixon was available, started sharing the work.
Yeah, and I think Kenneth Dixon might be the most talented back. That's why his ADP is actually ahead of Terrence West. But with a 4-game suspension, I mean, if you're in a redraft league, you're wasting a lot of time and a lot of bench. You have to roster him for 5 weeks before you get anything, and then at that point, are you going to start him in week 5 not having a clue who he is?
The 30th ranked offensive line doesn't help either.
And this is why all of that leads me to say Jeremy Maclin is the player I want here. I think he is locked and loaded into a wide receiver 2 role. I don't see him being a wide receiver 1, but if he falls into the wide receiver 3 category, I will be equally surprised. the amount of passing volume and the quality of player that he is, I think just puts him at a place where he's going to come into that Steve Smith role where Joe Flacco's number one target always has a pace of over 130 targets. If he gets that, Macklin's going to be just fine, and his value right now, because of those question marks and all the reasons we described, he's cheap.
And you got to throw out, of course, Ben Watson.
Well, I was going to say they threw the ball 9.9 times per game to the tight end, third in the league. So is Watson the flyer?
Yes, absolutely. Dennis Pitta is gone. He had the most
9.9 targets. My apologies. 9.9 targets, not receptions.
He had the most tight end receptions in the league last year. We're talking more than Travis Kelce.
Talking about Dennis Pitta.
Was Dennis Pitta. He suffered another injury, unfortunately, and he's out. Crockett Gilmore is recovering from injury.
Always.
Max Williams is looking to start the season on the pup.
He's done.
I mean, there's no one left. It's Ben Watson, who he's recovering himself from an Achilles injury, but by all reports, he should be ready to go. And if he becomes that Joe Flacco best friend, that's a completely free tight end that, as Andy said, 10 times a game they were targeting the tight end.
Did you consider last year, Jason, did you consider Pitta that number one target you talked about with Flacco?
No, because his fantasy points per target, and I'm just coming at it from a fantasy perspective, his fantasy points per target were so low. Was he
the leader? Do you know if he was the leader in targets on that Baltimore offense?
I believe he was. I'll bet that.
So he fits in. That's what I meant. When you're talking about Flacco's number one target having X amount of targets, last year you would have said that's the tight end.
Yes.
Okay. The Bengals. Let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Turnover at the running back position. Joe Mixon brought aboard. Giovanni Bernard may start on PUP. Jeremy Hill is still there. Andy Dalton gets some weapons back, a healthy A.J. Green. They went into the draft, and they brought in John Ross, very early pick, 9th pick of the draft. And then Tyler Eifert, at least for now, is healthy. The big headline for the offseason was losing Andrew Whitworth and Kevin Zeitler on the offensive line. Very high-grading offensive linemen that you have heading out the door. So a lot of concern from people at the running backs, for Dalton being able to be protected and be efficient. I still think that this team has a very good defense. I think they have an underrated defense, and they're going to be competing with the weapons that are currently healthy on that roster. What are the fantasy headlines for you guys? Where are you turning your attention?
My attention is squarely on Andy Dalton. I believe he has always been as good as his weapons allow him to be. He's not one of those guys. It reminds me a lot of Matt Ryan, who has always been a good quarterback when his weapons were good enough. But he's not going to take mediocrity and make them great the way that a Tom Brady can do.
Yeah,
but
Aaron Rodgers.
Right. But if Dalton has a group of great receivers, which right now it looks like he sure does, maybe his best he's ever had, then he was already, without that, a prime candidate to regress towards the mean on his percentage of
his
throws,
touchdown percentage.
Yeah, that go for touchdowns.
That means that you're talking positively.
Positive regression.
Well,
for
when
him.
you say when you just bring up the word regression, I think most people are going to hear that as
sure
he's going down.
No, but what happened is if you look at the pass attempts per touchdown of his career, and then you look at that on a chart, last year was just astronomically low for him. It was an outlier season, and part of that is the fact that he was under pressure and he had no targets to throw to. In 2015, when he was under pressure, he was a great quarterback. 2016, he was terrible. Well, he had no Mohamed Sanu. He had no Marvin Jones. A lot of the times he had no A.J. Green or Tyler Eifert.
He's basically a career mid 5% touchdown for every 5% of his throws are a score. He went down all the way to 3.2 last year.
All three of us have Andy Dalton currently ranked in our top 12.
We do?
We do.
Good for us.
There you go.
Jason and Mike, you have him at 12. I've got him at 8.
Yep, I don't have a problem with it. Tyler Eifert is
we can't forget the season this guy was having before he went down the year before.
Yeah, when he broke his thumb 2 years ago, he was a legitimate MVP candidate. And Tyler Eifert's the name I want to highlight, going currently in the 7th round of standard drafts, I should say non-PPR drafts, as the 6th tight end off the board. That's fantastic. If I miss out on the Gronk value, if Gronk is dropping Jordan Reed, then my eyes are set on Tyler Eifert. If I can get him in the 7th or even the 8th round, I think that's incredible.
Willing
value.
to overlook Kelsey or Olsen and get the value on Eifert.
Yes.
Now let me ask you this with Eifert. Let's say it's third week of August and he's not back yet. I expect he's going to be a close call for a week 1 start, and we won't know for sure. I'm guessing when most people's fantasy drafts are going. Are you willing to take him at a value if it means you've got to draft 2 tight ends?
Depends on that value. If you're saying I'm getting Tyler Eifert in the 7th round,
there's no way you're drafting 2 tight ends,
and he's not going to start week 1. I'm not going to spend the 7th round pick on him. But
if he drops to the 10th, then you can grab someone else.
I would do that.
Sure. The real question here is the running backs, though. For the Bengals, you have 2 running backs who have been fantasy relevant for the last few years in Gio Bernard and Jeremy Hill. But in comes the new hotness.
Yeah, and it makes sense because Jeremy Hill has been regressing in the downward sense for years. Every hope that you had for him to be this breakout elite super talent that he was that year 1, it's gone down every year. Now he's still an elite goal line back, and that's going to cause problems for Joe Mixon and his ability to break in and be a dominant top 12 type of guy if he's sharing goal line work with Jeremy Hill, who can get into the end zone. And Jeremy Hill runs angry down there at the goal line. Even last year with a bad year, he lead the league in or he had 10, 11? What was his total? Double digits again. I think he's had it for 2 consecutive years. Jeremy Hill is somebody that I think everybody wants to write off, and fantasy owners want the Bengals to write off for the sake of Joe Mixon. I'm just worried about how soon that will happen. I think Mixon's talent will show itself early and often, but what will that mean for Jeremy Hill being on or off the field?
Jeremy Hill had 9
touchdowns, but he also was.
What's his last 3 years?
I don't have that, but I'm saying he was 9th in 10 zone attempts. I mean, those are incredibly valuable.
Last 3 years was 9 touchdowns, 11 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns.
If those are the only touches he's getting, you're not going to want him on your fantasy team, but he is absolutely siphoning away what Joe Mixon can do.
All right, we're going to talk about the Browns now, guys. The Cleveland Browns. Woo-hoo! And it's an interesting thing to talk fantasy with Cleveland because you can make the jokes, right? How many quarterbacks did they have throw a pass last year?
12.
Yeah. That was 1 game. But, I mean, Cody Kessler's there now, Deshaun Kaiser, the draft pick. But this is a team that, when you look at the stats, they could run the ball. Number 1 in the league in terms of yards from scrimmage per touch for the running back position, 5.9. In the top 3 at 4.8 yards per carry from the running back position. They ran the ball often, and they ran it well between 2 different running backs, Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson. So how does that break down this year? Do they continue to turn to the running game in a volume perspective? Because that's the problem, right? You have those metrics, but those metrics aren't volume dependent.
Well,
they're performance dependent.
Right.
And maybe they wouldn't keep up if they were able to hand the ball off.
I have to correct you. As far as running back touches, they were at the bottom.
Well, no, what I was saying is
their efficiency,
yards per touch, not total touches.
Yeah, because I have them down. I have their running backs at a combined 279 attempts, which is 32nd in the league, and that's because they don't have the opportunity.
Well, and it all comes down to the 4th quarter, right? I mean, this is kind of what Andy's saying. The efficiency was there, but the opportunity wasn't. Can that opportunity turn around? And this year it definitely can for a multitude of reasons. You've got a team that is projected by Vegas to be 3.5 games better in the win column than they were last year. I mean, I'm just saying that.
What did they win last year? Was it 1?
Yeah, they're 4.5 this year. So I'm just
you did it, Cleveland.
You got up to being an under 5-win team, Cleveland. But that's just saying game script should be a little better. You have Hugh Jackson, who has always been near the leaders in rushing attempts, and that to me is far more important than the quality of the team. He knows he made a mistake last year in the 4th quarter. Sometimes it's out of your hands. I mean, when you're the Browns and you're down by more than 2 scores, you're just not able to keep running the ball. You've got a clock problem.
Well, and you have an improved offensive line again.
Yes, and that was the other.
You bring in J.C. Tretter, you bring in the aforementioned Zeitler from Cincinnati, and you bring in a guard, and you bring in David Njoku in the draft. I mean, this offensive line was good last year. I think they're better.
Well, Pro Football Focus is very excited.
Where do they have them?
Was this
number 2?
Second?
Number 2. in the league.
Check in with me in 6 weeks.
Yeah, but no, to the point, 31st in the league in points per game last year. It's a problem. They were in the shotgun 69% of the time. That's all you need to know if you want to know how often they were coming back in games. You can't be 1 in 50. This is the problem with the Carlos Hydes, Joe Williams. We talk about Crowell and Duke Johnson. These teams that the game script is all
Todd
negative.
Gurley's.
Sure, Todd Gurley too. The negative game scripts, the losing teams, it puts you in a tough position to have monster games as a running back. Because what is a monster game for a fantasy running back? We've seen this time and time again.
It's 102.
Get out ahead and then wear the defense down, hand the ball off, and your second half you're just salivating because I remember this, Arian Foster, all the time. Get out to a lead, let your defense do some work, and just hand the ball off over and over and over again. That's a rarity for Cleveland.
I'm glad you brought up Arian Foster because to go back to my quick question, Lamar Miller, how about this? Last year in the fourth quarter running attempts, Lamar Miller was second of qualified running backs. I mean, he gets the ball in the fourth, and Isaiah Crowell won't. I don't like where Crowell's going in drafts. He's inching closer and closer to the, middle upper question mark of that second round.
It's really annoying because his ADP
prevents.
Well, for me, I'm okay taking him there.
I feel like you're just saying he has to perform, though. I mean, if
No,
you're
I
taking
know.
him at the top of the second, that's
agreeing.
a ceiling.
We're agreeing. I'm saying it's annoying to me because the ADP is going to talk most people out of Isaiah Crowell and put that negative spin on his potential. Where I'm seeing last season, his current age, the improved offensive line, and Hugh Jackson and the way this team. Look, you're not. I know technically you can be worse than 1 in 15, but your odds of okay, let's say you win 4 games. Is that 3-4 more game scripts that flip for Isaiah Crowell, who already had a very efficient year with a better offensive line, with a better commitment to the run, maybe a better quarterback in place? I just see that. Look, the ADP may screw that up for me. I'm very high on Crowell rankings-wise, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, when it comes to the passing game that will, dictate a lot of whether, early in the games, is their passing game good enough to keep them, in a one-score game come the fourth quarter? That's going to come down to Kenny Britt and to Corey Coleman. And whoever the quarterback is, I know among the three of us, we all have very similar thoughts, but we disagree as to who will actually be the starter. Cody Kessler was, surprisingly good last year. I don't think a lot of people realize because they were on a one-team, a one-win team. Here's a tweet from Evan Silva just talking about the Browns quarterback Cody Kessler. Over the last 2 decades, when he looks at over 60% completion rate on a 7 yards or more adjusted per pass attempt, the list is very small. All great quarterbacks: Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, Dak Prescott, Marcus Mariota, and at number 6, Cody Kessler. So he wasn't
he was
bad
competent, and he was a rookie, and he was put into a tough position last year.
Yeah,
I've
quarterback
said
of
that
the
all.
Browns is a very tough position.
The only guy
Only for the past couple decades, Jason.
looking
That's
at the
true.
list of guys, I'm glad you brought him up, but I just want to highlight Kenny Britt. He got 1,000 yards on a bad team last year. I'm not projecting 1,000 yards this year, but he's likely the only guy from Cleveland that I'll be targeting.
So you're targeting Brett over Coleman?
Yes.
Like at the end of the year, you think Brett's going to have a better fantasy season than Corey Coleman?
Yes. I feel very strongly about that.
How strongly?
Are you talking a waterbed? Because if it's a waterbed,
Problem
yes.
is, I can't. I want to make the water bet, but I also want to know that Corey Coleman's going to play Week 1, and so if Corey Coleman's healthy Week 1, you want that water bet?
It's so convoluted.
Waterbed.
Here's the
No,
reality.
I only did that because I want you to have a bet where you're depending on Kenny Britt.
I will.
I want him in your pocket. I want to tag you with his name forever.
Hey, thankfully, Kenny Britt is no stranger to finding success with bad quarterbacks. It's all he's known his entire career is bad quarterbacks. Corey Coleman has the upside, though. To me, if Corey Coleman comes out and shows the potential that he showed, in Week 2 last year and gets something going, he was drafted to be that. He was drafted to be that, crazy burner, Odell Beckham style guy. He's got great hands in theory, and then last year in his rookie year.
Theory?
Well, no, I'm just saying in college.
Yeah, no, he does.
Looks like he's got great hands, and then he caught 42% of his balls last year, something like that. I mean, that's gotta
Welcome to
improve.
Cleveland.
And a lot of that is with Cody Kessler. He was much worse with Cody Kessler than he was with other quarterbacks. So if Kaiser is the week 1 starter, as you think is possible, Andy, then that could be good for the deep ball, for Corey Coleman's speed, and what he's able to do.
All right, last name is David Njoku. They drafted him in the first round. They let Gary Barnidge go. I've been somewhat pronounced with my adoration for David Njoku, and that is talent and opportunity. He's a starting tight end on an NFL franchise. He's a friend to young quarterbacks. And while he is currently sitting, I believe, 12 or 13 on my rankings, I do think that Njoku will have a very solid year in Cleveland.
They did give him quite the vote of confidence of when they drafted him on the phone. They said, "Hold on, David.
Let me switch lines."
And they clicked the switch over to the other line. Okay. Oh, sorry, Gary Barnidge. We the pick went in. We got to let you go.
Yeah, pretty much. So, all right, hey, we don't have time to get into the NFC North.
We're
going to get into some mailbag.
Okay.
Mailbag.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with some here's a question that comes in from Diego in South Plainfield, New Jersey. That's how he wrote it. By the way, if you have a question,
Not my words.
go to thefantasyfootballers.com, click submit a question. You can also dial our voicemail hotline 302-464-TFFB. His question is basically, look, how do you have Keenan Allen as a Tier 5 guy in standard formats? I understand the injury concern. The presence of other targets in the offense. His talent, though, is undeniable. The chemistry between himself and Rivers was apparent. It's a fair critique, and I think a lot of it is
Diego's a wise man.
Well, look, with a guy like Keenan Allen, I've been, much like Martavis Bryant and other players this offseason, it's been a patience thing on my rankings. If you think my rankings in February need to look the exact same as they do in August, I really need a crystal ball. I mean, it's not going to happen. I'm being patient with the recovery of Keenan Allen, with the recovery of Mike Williams, with what we've seen from Tyrell Williams last year. I think he ranked number 1 in the league on 2 different route types in terms of the post and the out. And so I'm being patient with Keenan Allen. That's too low as a tier. So if that's what our standard tier is, that's too low.
Tier 5 sounds a little too low, but in standard, you've got a guy that, there's worries. He hasn't, over the last 2 years, and his career average is under 11 yards of reception. It's very low for a wide receiver. That's a guy that's playing the slot role or the move the chains role, and he's not been a real touchdown guy. I mean, his rookie season when he was needed to be in that role, he looked great at it. But, he's had 4 touchdowns essentially since then. And so it's just one of those things
I take back my apology. You want Keenan Allen or do you want Larry Fitzgerald?
Keenan Allen.
All right, would you agree they're in the same tier?
Sure.
Yeah, I can agree with
Okay,
that.
what about Martavis Bryant?
Oh, Bryant.
Yeah, I think I want Martavis.
Tyreek Hill?
We're just talking standard,
I want
right?
Keenan Allen.
This is just a standard league.
Keenan Allen.
Jeremy Maclin?
Keenan Allen.
Okay.
Macklin.
So he's teetering the line between a 4 and 5 according to our rankings. 4s are like Crabtree, Demaryius Thomas, Devontae Adams. I think he's right around that range with the huge upside of if he can put together like a season similar to the first 7 games of 2015.
He will.
Okay.
He will.
You and your injured players. My goodness. All right, what's the best way to join a dynasty league for free if that is even possible? That's from Jake in Delaware. How do you join a dynasty league?
Jake, have you tried opening your front door and shouting, "Does anyone play dynasty fantasy football?"
Or since it's
I'm just asking if he's tried that.
Since it's no longer the 80s where you can only be friends with people on your street, you pull out your cell phone and call friends. I mean, hopefully you've got a league that you're in right now with other players. See if they want to start a dynasty, and if any of them have any friends that want to start a dynasty, if you want to go for free. If you're a member of the Foot Clan, we've got footclanleagues.com where dynasty leagues are starting up all the time, and you know that they're good people. They know what
Committed.
they're doing. They're going to have fun in the league. So that's another approach.
All right, so we're going to get into the NFC North on the next episode. The Packers,
King of the North.
the Packers, the Lions, the Vikings, and the Bears.
There's a lot happening in the North these days.
There is a lot happening in the North. How did you like that first episode
Whoa.
of
Oh,
I'm still recovering.
Game of Thrones?
well, we got to save that for the show after the show, gentlemen.
What did you eat during? Did you
That's a
get
good
something
question.
special for the episode?
I actually did a pizza party with the children before Game of Thrones, not while watching Game of Thrones.
Carb them up so that they sleep.
That's smart.
Yeah, we'll tell that to my 3-year-old who was up till like 10 o'clock
Ooh,
because he's a monster.
That's no good.
Yeah, well, you're the father of dragons. So, all right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. Definitely check out the Ultimate Draft Kit over at ultimatedraftkit.com. Get you ready for the 2017 season. And don't forget, get hooked up with PlayDraft. We play best ball leagues over there, playdraft.com/ballers. It's a lot of fun. Mike will be doing another live best ball draft this week.
It might happen later today. Check the tweeter.
Really?
I don't know.
Maybe. Goodbye.
All right, goodbye.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com and follow us on Twitter @TheFFBallers.